Hi everyone, let's get started by briefly discussing what a TRF or time-restricted feeding diet is. So this is a form of intermittent fasting where individuals extend periods without the consumption of food. There are various forms of this diet that one might choose to adhere to, but one popular choice is often referred to as the 16-8. And this particular form asks that individuals fast for 16 hours each day, allowing for water and non-caloric beverages, but they must consume all of their energy in the same 8-hour feeding window of their choosing each day. And endurance athletes have adopted this dietary pattern based on a perceived performance benefit, and that fasting and endurance training utilize similar metabolic pathways for their resulting adaptations. But as with many trending diets, the data to support its efficacy in this population has not been established, as to our knowledge it has only been tested in resistance-trained athletes. But we did see favorable alterations to body composition in those investigations. So this leads to the purpose of our study, which was to determine how 4 weeks of adherence to an 8-hour feeding window or a 16-8 TRF diet versus a normal diet with a 12-hour feeding window would affect exercise performance, metabolism, and recovery in male endurance runners. To examine these aims, we recruited subjects who were running 20 miles a week. They had recently competed in a race, and we verified their aerobic fitness with the VO2 max test. We ensured subjects were adhering to similar dietary patterns appropriate for their training as outlined by the ACSM guidelines for endurance athletes. And finally, we needed subjects to be willing to keep their exercise and training the same for 2 separate 1-month arms. And this was verified by having them log their food 3 days a week utilizing MyFitnessPal and wearing a Polar A370 activity monitor during all training that was completed. And it was important that we monitor this because the study is part of a randomized crossover. So alterations to training and macronutrient intake could have resulted in a confounding effect. Subjects completed a familiarization visit before starting the study protocol. And then they had their 4 test days at the beginning and end of each diet. So the first and second were on the first and last day of the initial 4-week treatment that they were randomized to. They had a 2-week washout, and then we had them finish up their 3rd and 4th visits at the beginning and end of their adherence to the remaining dietary treatment. On test day, subjects completed validated questionnaires. They completed a DEXA scan and a substrate utilization test. And this is a fasted treadmill test utilizing indirect calorimetry, where subjects run at speeds equivalent to their 60, 70, 80, and 90% VO2 max, as we determined from that familiarization visit. So at the end of these 3-minute stages, we've collected all of the information we have here, as well as we obtained a ear stick to collect blood and circulating blood glucose and blood lactate. And finally, we give them 10 minutes of rest after this before they go on to a 10-kilometer time trial. And this is being used as a more direct measure of their running performance. Data was analyzed with a linear mixed model accounting for diet and sequence of treatment, as well as a post-hoc 2Ds test. Here we can see our subject characteristics on the left, and we can see that there's a mean maximal oxygen consumption of 55.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute. And then on the right here, we see the differences in their dietary intake and exercise from adherence to each treatment, which was fairly consistent. There was nothing significantly different, with the exception of the feeding window, which was to be expected. Here we can see that adherence to a TRF diet compared to a normal diet has led to a significant decrease in fat mass, but they were able to retain their fat-free mass on the diet. This also translated to a significant decrease in the body fat percent. Here we see that the TRF diet led to a significant drop in circulating blood lactate. We also saw that there were decreases in RER at each stage in the substrate utilization. So this more reliance on fat during exercise might explain some of those body composition changes we saw on the previous slide, although I must stress that this was not showing a significant effect with a p-value of 0.15. And the data here shows that there was no significant effect from the performance in a 10-kilometer time trial. On the bottom here, I have a line graph showing the inter-individual responses by subject in the time to complete the trial. We have our mean values here in red. So this just further illustrates that while variances in time to complete the trial were seen in some subjects, it did not lead to significant changes. So in conclusion, adherence to a time-restricted feeding diet for 4 weeks may lead to metabolic adaptations causing less circulating lactate, and no significant changes were seen in recovery-related questionnaires, VO2, glucose, RPE, or performance testing. And considering these findings and the significant decrease in fat mass, what we can take from this is that adherence to a TRF diet might be a useful tool for middle distance runners that are seeking to reduce body fat during a training season without limiting their performance. So thank you to all of those involved in our study, and thank you for listening to learn about our project.